Growing closer by early autumn, Sophia had become a regular presence in Julian and Rohan's life. What began as occasional help during Julian's work emergencies evolved into weekend outings to museums and parks. Dinners where the three of them discussed everything from Rohan's school projects to manuscript developments, and quiet evenings after Rohan's bedtime when Julian and Sophia worked side by side in comfortable silence. At the office, they maintained a professional distance, but subtle changes were evident to those paying attention. Julian's critiques, while still exacting, had lost their cutting edge. Sophia found herself defending her editorial positions not out of defiance, but genuine intellectual engagement. Their collaborative work improved, producing a string of successful manuscripts that had the entire publishing house buzzing. On a crisp October evening, Sophia sat on Julian's living room floor helping Rohan with a science project about the solar system. Julian worked nearby, occasionally glancing up from his laptop to watch them. "Jupiter needs more spots," Rohan declared, critically examining their painted styrofoam ball. "You're right," Sophia agreed, mixing more paint. "Details matter, just like in books," Rohan said seriously. "Uncle Julian always says the small details make the big picture work." Julian looked up, meeting Sophia's amused gaze. "I see my editorial philosophy is being passed to the next generation." "Heaven help us all," Sophia teased, earning a rare smile from Julian. Later, after Rohan had gone to bed, they sat on Julian's balcony with glasses of wine. The city lights glimmered below them, and the autumn air carried the scent of distant wood smoke. "His oncologist is pleased with his progress," Julian said quietly. "The new treatment protocol is working. His blood counts are improving." Sophia reached across the small table, briefly touching his hand. "That's wonderful news, Julian." He didn't pull away from her touch. "I don't know how I would have managed these past months without your help." "You would have found a way," Sophia said. "You're remarkably resourceful." Julian shook his head. "Before you knew about Rohan, I was drowning, trying to be perfect in every role, guardian, publishing director, decision maker, and failing at all of them." "You weren't failing," Sophia protested. "I was. At work, I was distracted, worried about Rohan. At home, I was exhausted thinking about deadlines." He looked at her directly. "You created a bridge between those worlds that made both possible." The admission hung in the air between them, weighted with unspoken emotion. "Why did you stay?" Julian asked suddenly. "That day you came to my office, I know you were planning to resign. I saw the letter in your hand." Sophia considered her answer carefully. "At first, it was because I understood why you were so demanding. It contextualized everything. But then I got to know you. The real you, not just the perfectionist editor." She smiled softly. "And I discovered I liked that person very much." Julian set down his wine glass and moved his chair closer to hers. In the dim light, his eyes were dark and intent. "Sophia," he said, her name still sounding new on his lips. "I've spent my adult life keeping people at a distance. It seemed safer, especially after taking responsibility for Rohan. No complications, no distractions." "And now?" Sophia asked, her heart beating faster. "Now I find myself hoping for complications." His hand found hers, fingers intertwining. "Specifically, complications involving you." The kiss that followed was gentle, questioning, then deepening with shared certainty. When they pulled apart, Julian looked both surprised and pleased, as if he'd discovered something unexpected in a familiar text. "I should probably tell you," Sophia said, smiling against his lips, "that if this is your attempt to ensure I don't resign, it's highly unprofessional." Julian laughed, a full, rich sound she'd heard only in Rohan's presence before now. "Is it working?" "Completely," she admitted, leaning in to kiss him again. As the night deepened around them, Sophia realized that her decision to stay hadn't just changed her professional path. It had altered the course of her heart. What had begun as reluctant understanding had blossomed into something neither of them had been looking for, but both now treasured. The breaking point, Sophia Martinez stared at the resignation letter on her screen, cursor blinking beside her electronic signature. After 18 months as a senior editor at Meridian Publishing, she had finally reached her limit. Her finger hovered over the print button, hesitating only briefly before pressing down with finality. The printer hummed to life across her small office, spitting out the single page that would free her from the daily torment of working under Julian Kapoor, Meridian's brilliant but impossibly demanding editorial director. 3, 2, 1, Sophia whispered, counting down as if on cue. Her office phone rang exactly at 9:00 a.m. as it did every morning. "Martinez," she answered, already knowing who it would be. "The Patterson manuscript. My office. Now." Julian's clipped British Indian accent came through the line, followed immediately by the click of disconnection. No greeting, no pleasantries. Typical Julian. Sophia gathered the manuscript and her tablet, tucking her resignation letter into a folder. Perhaps she'd deliver both at once and watch the infamous Julian Kapoor finally show a human reaction. The thought brought her the first genuine smile she'd had at work in months. The editorial floor was already buzzing with activity, but conversations dimmed as she passed. Everyone knew what it meant to be summoned to Julian's office first thing Monday morning. Her colleague Thomas mouthed, "Good luck," as she walked by his desk. Julian's corner office embodied his personality, meticulously organized, aesthetically minimal, and intimidatingly pristine. He stood by the window, his tall frame silhouetted against the morning light, phone pressed to his ear. At 38, Julian Kapoor had become one of publishing's most respected editorial minds, known for transforming struggling manuscripts into bestsellers through his uncompromising standards. "I understand the implications," he was saying into the phone, his voice low and controlled. "But quality isn't negotiable regardless of the deadline. Yes, fine, goodbye." He turned as Sophia entered, his expression unchanged as he set down his phone. Dark eyes, perpetually calculating, assessed her from behind designer glasses. "You're late." "It's 9:02, Sophia replied, refusing to apologize for the 2-minute discrepancy. "When I say now, I mean immediately." Julian extended his hand for the manuscript. "Your notes?" "Completed last night," Sophia said, passing him both the printed pages and her tablet. "As you requested, I focused on the structural issues in chapters 7 through 12. Julian scanned her comments with rapid efficiency. "The character's motivation shift in chapter 9 is still problematic." "I disagree," Sophia replied, standing her ground. "Her decision is consistent with the trauma response established earlier." Julian looked up, one eyebrow slightly raised, the closest thing to surprise he ever showed. "Substantiate." For 15 minutes, they debated the finer points of character psychology, Julian challenging every assertion Sophia made. This was their routine, his relentless questioning, her determined defense. In another context, these intellectual sparrings might have been stimulating. Under the weight of months of criticism and impossible expectations, they had become exhausting. "Fine," Julian finally conceded. "Your assessment has merit. Address the pacing issues and have it back to me by 4. "Actually," Sophia said, reaching for the folder containing her resignation, "I wanted to discuss something else." Julian's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and for a split second, something flickered across his face. Concern, perhaps even fear. It disappeared so quickly, Sophia thought she might have imagined it. "Not now," he said abruptly. "This afternoon, I have an urgent matter." He was already reaching for his jacket. "But 4 o'clock, Martinez, with the revised manuscript." He moved past her with unusual haste, leaving Sophia standing alone in his office, resignation letter still in hand. She watched through the glass wall as he hurried toward the elevator, breaking his usual measured stride. Something wasn't right. Julian Kapoor never rushed, never left meetings unfinished, and certainly never left the office before noon. The resignation letter suddenly felt heavier in her hand. Despite her determination to walk away, Sophia couldn't help but wonder what had just happened. What urgent matter could possibly make the imperturbable Julian Kapoor look, for just a moment, completely vulnerable? The unexpected discovery. 4 o'clock came and went with no sign of Julian returning to the office. Sophia had completed the revisions but sat at her desk, manuscript and resignation letter side by side, unsure of her next move. By 6, most of the staff had departed, leaving the office floor in twilight silence. "He still hasn't come back," Thomas said, stopping by her desk on his way out. "The great disappearing act of Julian Kapoor, that's twice this week." "Twice?" Sophia looked up surprised. "You didn't notice on Wednesday?" "Left after lunch, no explanation. Olivia from accounting said she saw him rushing out with his phone glued to his ear, looking like someone had died." Thomas shrugged. Probably just another literary emergency with one of his star authors. After Thomas left, Sophia gathered her things, deciding to drop the manuscript in Julian's office before heading home. She would save her resignation for tomorrow. As she approached his office, she noticed his desk lamp was on. He must have returned without anyone noticing. The door was partially open. Sophia knocked lightly but received no answer. Pushing the door wider, she stepped in, intending to leave the manuscript on his desk. That's when she heard it, Julian's voice coming from his private bathroom, the door slightly ajar. "I know, buddy. I know." His tone was gentle, almost tender. A voice she'd never heard from him before. "Yes, I promise I'll be home soon. You need to let Mrs. Patel give you your medicine first." Sophia froze, knowing she should leave but rooted to the spot by the transformation in his voice. "Can you be brave for me? Like the night in your story?" Julian continued, his voice dropping to a whisper. "That's right. Uncle Julian will bring ice cream if you take your medicine. The strawberry kind you like, Uncle Julian?" Sophia's mind raced. In 18 months, Julian had never mentioned family of any kind. "Let alone a child? I love you too, Rohan. Be good for Mrs. Patel. I'll be home soon." Sophia backed away quickly, but her elbow caught a stack of books on the side table. They toppled with a crash just as Julian emerged from the bathroom. Their eyes met in startled recognition. "Martinez," he said, his face immediately reassuming its impassive mask. "Why are you in my office?" I was just dropping off the Patterson manuscript," she stammered, placing it on his desk. "I didn't mean to intrude." Julian stood unnaturally still, assessing her with those calculating eyes. "How long were you standing there?" Sophia considered lying, but found she couldn't. "Long enough to hear part of your conversation." "I apologize. It was unintentional." She expected anger, perhaps even termination on the spot for violating his privacy. Instead, Julian sank into his chair, a weariness settling over him that made him look suddenly older. "How much did you hear?" he asked quietly. "Something about medicine. And someone named Rohan." Julian was silent for so long that Sophia thought he might not respond. When he finally spoke, his voice was controlled but strained. "Rohan is my nephew. He's 6. Julian removed his glasses, pinching the bridge of his nose. "He's been living with me for the past 8 months, since my sister and her husband died in a car accident in London." The revelation stunned Sophia. "I had no idea you had a sister, let alone a nephew." "That was intentional," Julian said. "I've kept my personal life separate from work. Especially this. Why?" The question slipped out before Sophia could stop herself. Julian's expression hardened. "Because publishing is a small world full of big opinions. Because I've spent 15 years building my reputation as someone reliable, focused, and available at all hours. Because..." He stopped abruptly, as if catching himself revealing too much. "Because having a child doesn't fit with that image," Sophia finished for him. "Rohan has leukemia," Julian said, the words falling between them like stones. "Diagnosed 2 months before the accident. My sister and her husband were returning from a consultation when..." He trailed off. "He's responding well to treatment, but there are complications. Today was an emergency." His fever spiked. Sophia felt her resignation letter burning in her pocket. All the frustration she'd harbored toward this man suddenly seemed trivial compared to what he was facing. "I should go," she said softly. Julian nodded, already reaching for his phone, the wall between them reconstructing itself. But as Sophia turned to leave, he spoke again. "Martinez." His voice halted her. "I would appreciate your discretion in this matter." It wasn't just a request. It was a glimpse of vulnerability from a man who had never shown any. "Of course," she answered. As she walked to the elevator, Sophia pulled out her resignation letter and stared at it. The woman who had written it this morning felt like a stranger now. She crumpled the paper and tossed it into a trash bin. Some decisions, she realized, needed reconsideration. A change of heart. The following weeks revealed a Julian Kapoor that Sophia had never known existed. Once she became aware of his situation, she noticed the patterns, the subtle glances at his phone during meetings, the way he would step out precisely when the school day ended, the occasional dark circles under his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights. 3 weeks after discovering his secret, Sophia was working late when Julian appeared at her office door, looking uncharacteristically hesitant. "Martinez, I need a favor," he said, the words clearly difficult for him. "Mrs. Patel, Rohan's caretaker, has a family emergency. I have the Henderson meeting in 30 minutes that I cannot reschedule. Rohan's school called. He needs to be picked up." Sophia understood immediately what he was asking. "Text me the address. I'll get him." Relief flashed across Julian's face, quickly masked. "He knows about you. I told him you're my colleague." This small admission that Julian had mentioned her to his nephew caught Sophia by surprise. The elementary school was 15 minutes away. As Sophia waited in the office, she wondered what Julian had told his nephew about her. Had he described her as difficult, argumentative, competent at least? Her thoughts scattered when a small boy appeared, escorted by a teacher. Rohan Kapoor was thin, with Julian's dark eyes and a shy demeanor. A bright blue beanie covered what Sophia guessed was hair loss from treatment. "You're Miss Martinez," he said solemnly. "Uncle Julian said you'd come." "That's right," Sophia smiled, kneeling to his level. "Your uncle had an important meeting, so I offered to help." Rohan studied her face with the same assessing gaze as his uncle. "Are you nice?" The question, so direct and childlike, made Sophia laugh. "I try to be. Your uncle might disagree sometimes." Rohan nodded, considering this. "Uncle Julian says you fight with him about books, but that it makes the books better." This revelation stunned Sophia. Julian had not only mentioned her, but had done so positively. The drive to Julian's apartment was filled with Rohan's chatter about school, his friends, and his collection of dinosaur figures. By the time they arrived at an elegant brownstone in Greenwich Village, Sophia felt charmed by this bright, resilient child. Julian's home was a revelation, warm, filled with books and art, with Rohan's presence evident in colorful drawings on the refrigerator and toys carefully arranged on shelves. Nothing like the sterile perfection of his office. "Would you like to see my dinosaurs?" Rohan asked, already tugging her toward his room. For the next hour, Sophia was introduced to an elaborate dinosaur civilization with complex social structures and dramatic conflicts, a storytelling ability clearly inherited from his literary family. When Julian finally arrived, he stood in the doorway of Rohan's room, watching them with an unreadable expression. "Uncle Julian!" Rohan exclaimed. "Miss Martinez knows all about velociraptors. She says they had feathers like birds." "Does she?" Julian replied, his eyes meeting Sophia's over his nephew's head. After Rohan was settled with dinner, Julian walked Sophia to the door. "Thank you," he said quietly. This was beyond professional obligation. "It wasn't an obligation at all," Sophia replied honestly. "He's a wonderful child." Something in Julian's expression softened. "Martinez, Sophia, would you consider—" "That is, Rohan clearly enjoyed your company. Perhaps you might visit again? As a friend?" The request, so hesitant and personal, was more revealing than any confession. Julian Kapoor, the man who needed no one, was asking for help. "I'd like that," she answered, surprised by how much she meant it. As she left the brownstone, Sophia realized that her perspective had irrevocably shifted. The man she had been determined to walk away from weeks ago was not who she thought he was. Behind the demanding editorial director was a man fighting private battles with quiet determination, raising a child while navigating a world that knew nothing of his struggles. The walls between them had begun to crumble, revealing something neither of them had anticipated: understanding, respect, and the possibility of more. New beginnings. The crisis came, as most do, without warning. Sophia was in an acquisitions meeting when her phone lit up with Julian's name. One glance at the screen told her everything. He never called during meetings unless it was about Rohan. "Excuse me?" she said, already rising from her chair. "I need to take this." In the hallway, Julian's voice was tense but controlled. "Rohan's been admitted to the hospital. His fever spiked during school. I'm on my way there now." "I'll meet you," Sophia said immediately. "Which hospital?" "Mount Sinai Pediatric Oncology." "But the board meeting will happen without you," she finished firmly. "I'll handle it." The next hours blurred as Sophia alternated between the hospital and the publishing house, covering Julian's responsibilities while providing updates to the executive team without revealing why he was absent. By evening, the situation had stabilized. Rohan's infection was responding to antibiotics, but he would need to remain hospitalized for several days. Sophia found Julian in the hospital cafeteria, staring blankly at an untouched cup of coffee. When he looked up, the relief in his eyes at seeing her made her heart constrict. "The Henderson contract is signed," she said, sitting beside him. "I postponed the marketing review until next week, and the board understands you had a family emergency." Julian rubbed his eyes wearily. "What exactly did you tell them?" "The truth," Sophia replied simply. "That you're a single guardian to your nephew who has a medical condition requiring your immediate attention." Nothing specific, nothing detailed. Julian was quiet for a long moment. "I've spent 8 months hiding this part of my life, convinced it would undermine everything I've built professionally. And now? Now I'm wondering what I was so afraid of." He looked at her with sudden clarity. "I can't keep dividing my life this way. Rohan deserves better. I deserve better." 3 days later, Julian returned to the office with a new resolve. He requested a meeting with the entire editorial department, something unprecedented in his tenure as director. Standing before his assembled team with Sophia at his side, Julian spoke with a candor that visibly surprised his colleagues. "For the past 8 months, I have been raising my nephew following the death of my sister and brother-in-law," he began. "Rohan is 6 years old and is battling leukemia. I have kept this separate from my professional life, believing that personal matters had no place in our work environment." The room was utterly silent. "I was wrong," Julian continued. "In trying to maintain an impossible division between these parts of my life, I've done a disservice to all of you, to myself, and most importantly, to my nephew. Moving forward, there will be changes in how I work and how this department functions." Julian outlined a restructuring of the editorial department, more collaborative teams, flexible schedules, and a new co-director position he wanted Sophia to fill. The changes would allow him to be present for Rohan while maintaining the quality of work Meridian was known for. "This is not just about accommodating my situation," he explained. "It's about creating a publishing house that recognizes we are all whole people with lives beyond these walls. I believe this will make us stronger, not weaker." The response was overwhelmingly positive. Colleagues who had found Julian intimidating now approached him with understanding and offers of support. The walls he had built around himself for years crumbled completely, revealing not weakness but a new kind of strength. That evening, Sophia and Julian took Rohan home from the hospital together. As they helped him settle into bed, the boy looked between them with sleepy perception. "Are you staying, Miss Sophia?" he asked. Sophia glanced at Julian, unsure how to answer. "Would you like her to stay?" Julian asked his nephew gently. Rohan nodded. "She makes you smile more. And she knows about dinosaurs." Julian laughed, meeting Sophia's eyes over the child's head. "Both excellent qualities. What do you say, Sophia? Would you like to stay?" The question held layers of meaning beyond the immediate moment. In it, Sophia heard an invitation not just for tonight, but for all the nights to come. "Yes," she answered, her heart full. "I'd like that very much." Later, standing on the balcony where they had first crossed the boundary from colleagues to something more, Julian took Sophia's hands in his. "When you walked into my office that day with your resignation letter, I thought I was losing a valuable editor," he said softly. "I had no idea I was actually finding the missing piece of my life." "Sometimes the best stories are the ones we never planned to write," Sophia replied, leaning into his embrace. Below them, the city continued its constant motion, lights winking in the darkness like stars. Above, the actual stars glimmered, bearing witness to this unexpected chapter in their lives, one that had begun with an ending averted and now stretched before them, full of promise and possibility. In choosing to stay rather than walk away, Sophia had not only changed Julian's life and Rohan's, she had transformed her own, finding a family and a future in the most unexpected of places. The story that had begun with resignation had become one of resilience, revealing that sometimes the walls we build to protect ourselves are the very ones that need to fall for us to truly begin living.